The first thing Elias Mercer noticed about the alien woman was that she was trying very hard not to shiver. This, in itself, was strange. The ice moon of Keros, 9 was cold enough to make steel groan and fracture, yet the Valari delegation insisted on conducting negotiations outside their thermal domes, under the open sky. They claimed it was a gesture of strength. A test. Elias stood with his hands clasped behind his back, breath fogging in short, controlled bursts. His human escort detail wore full thermal exosuits, but Elias had refused the helmet. He wanted them to see his face. Wanted them to know he wasn't afraid. Across from him, the Valari emissary, High Speaker Aleth, stood perfectly still, her tall, willowy frame wrapped in ceremonial silks that fluttered uselessly against the wind. Her skin shimmered with a faint bioluminescent sheen, pale blues and silvers pulsing beneath translucent flesh. And she was freezing. Elias could see it now. The subtle tightening of her jaw. The way her fingers curled inward, claws pressing into her palms. The near-imperceptible tremor running through her long, elegant tail. The Valari were a cold-adapted species. Or so the report said. Apparently, the reports lied. The negotiations dragged on. Trade corridors. Military non-aggression clauses. Shared exploration rights beyond the Perseus Veil. The usual diplomatic dance. Words piled on words while the temperature continued to drop. Elias watched Asiletha's breathing quicken. She was too proud to say anything. Too important. Too alien. The wind howled across the frozen plain, carrying ice crystals sharp enough to sting exposed skin. Elias felt it cut through his own jacket, thick, reinforced human issue, and made a decision. Before his advisors could stop him, before his security detail could even register the movement, Elias stepped forward. The murmurs began instantly. He shrugged out of his jacket in one smooth motion. The Valari guards tensed, hands drifting toward their weapons. Human Marines mirrored them. For a heartbeat, the galaxy balanced on the edge of misunderstanding. Elias ignored all of it. He walked up to Asileth, careful and deliberate, and held the jacket out to her. "You're cold," he said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Asileth stared at the jacket, as if it were a living thing. Her eyes, large, multifaceted, and ancient, lifted to his face. "I am Valari," she said, her voice tight. "We do not." "You are freezing," Elias repeated softer now. "And negotiations don't mean much if one side collapses." A faint ripple of color passed across her skin. Confusion, surprise, something dangerously close to emotion. "This garment," she said slowly, "it is designed for your species." "Yeah," Elias replied, "but warmth is universal." Another gust of wind tore across the plain. Asiletha's shoulders twitched. That did it. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the fabric, and she flinched, startled by the residual heat trapped within. Slowly, hesitantly, she accepted the jacket. When she draped it around herself, the reaction was immediate. The bioluminescence along her skin brightened, stabilizing into calmer hues. Her breathing slowed. The tremor faded. Across the assembled delegations, shock spread like wildfire. No one gave personal items to a Valari. Especially not humans. Especially not during first contact level negotiations. Elias stepped back, now fully exposed to the cold. His aide hissed through clenched teeth. "Sir Yule." "I'm fine," Elias said, teeth chattering despite his calm tone. Asileth studied him for a long moment. Then, to the astonishment of every being present, she adjusted the jacket more securely around herself and inclined her head. "Proceed," she said. The negotiations changed after that. Not immediately. Not dramatically. but subtly, in ways only diplomats and ancient species could perceive. Asileth, listen more. When Elias spoke, she did not interrupt. When disagreements arose, she asked questions instead of issuing ultimatums. By the time the talks concluded, the Valari had agreed to terms far more favorable than humanity had dared to hope. As the delegations prepared to depart, Asileth approached Elias once more. "You risked yourself," she said. "Why?" Elias shrugged, rubbing his arms. "Didn't seem right to let someone freeze." She tilted her head, studying him anew. "You humans are strange." He smiled. "We get that a lot." She hesitated, then reached out and returned the jacket to him. It was warmer than when he'd given it. "Among my people," she said, "we believe warmth is a resource to be guarded, shared only with kin." Her eyes met his. "Today, you treated me as kin." Elias blinked.
"Ah.
"You're welcome." Asileth's bioluminescence flared, a Valari sign of deep significance. "You should know," she continued, "that the Valari do not forget such gestures." Weeks later, the galaxy began to understand what that meant. When pirate coalitions threatened human supply lines, Valari warfleets appeared without announcement. When border worlds suffered power failures, Valari engineers arrived with solutions centuries ahead of human technology. When the Terran assembly faced censure from older, more arrogant civilizations, Valari diplomats spoke in humanity's defense with icy precision. Whispers spread. The Valari favor the humans. The Valari protect them.
Why?
The answer came during the crisis of Keros 9. A stellar fracture destabilized the moon's core. Evacuation was impossible at scale. Millions of Valari were stranded. Human ships arrived first. Against orders. Against logic. Against survival probabilities. Elias Mercer stood once more on the frozen surface, older now, his jacket patched and worn. Asileth emerged from the chaos, her composure fraying for the first time since he'd known her. "Our people will not survive," she said quietly. Elias looked at the collapsing horizon, at the impossible task before them. "Then we don't leave," he said. Human engineers worked until their hands bled. Pilots flew until exhaustion claimed them. Medics treated alien physiology with improvised brilliance. When power failed in one of the shelters, Elias removed his jacket, that same jacket, and wrapped it around a Valari child, ignoring the protests of his staff. Asileth watched. And in that moment, something ancient shifted. When the evacuation ended, against all odds, Keros 9 was empty of life before it shattered. No Valari were lost. At the joint memorial, Asileth addressed the gathered fleets. "Long ago," she said, "a human gave me his warmth without expectation of return." Her gaze found Elias in the crowd. "That is why, when the cold came for us, humanity stood with us." She paused. "The galaxy believes strength is measured in weapons and territory." Her voice hardened. "We have learned it can also be measured in compassion." The Valari-human accord reshaped known space. And among the Valari, a new phrase entered their language. A human's jacket. It meant mercy in the cold. It meant kinship without blood. It meant that sometimes the smallest act could echo across the stars. Elias never did get a new jacket. He didn't need one. The galaxy was warmer now. Years later, long after the crisis of Keros 9 had become required study at every major academy, Elias Mercer stood in a place no human had ever been invited before. The Valari Inner Circle. The chamber was carved from living crystal, its walls humming softly with controlled thermal currents. Warmth, not artificial, but shared, flowed evenly through the space. Elias wore no jacket. He didn't need one. Asileth stood at the center of the circle, no longer bearing the title of High Speaker. She was something older now, something rarer, keeper of bonds. When we first met, she said, her voice echoing gently through the chamber, we believed humans were fragile, short-lived, ruled by impulse. A ripple of soft amusement passed through the Valari elders. We were wrong. She turned fully toward Elias. You taught us something we had forgotten in our long survival, that warmth hoarded becomes meaningless, but warmth shared becomes civilization. At her gesture, an attendant approached, carrying an object wrapped in ceremonial cloth. Elias frowned. That's not. The cloth fell away.
His jacket.
Or rather, what had once been his jacket. It had been reinforced with Valari thermal filaments, restored stitch by stitch, preserved as a cultural artifact. Along the inner lining, symbols glowed faintly, Valari script woven into the fabric. Asileth lifted it reverently. This garment is now recognized as a relic of first kinship, she said. It belongs not to a museum, but to the one who never treated it as important. She held it out to him. Elias hesitated. You sure? Seems like it should stay here. A faint smile touched her lips. You gave it away once without hesitation, she said. That is why it must remain with you. He accepted it. The fabric was warm, not heated.
Warm.
From this day forward, Asileth announced, the Valari stand bound to humanity, not by treaty alone, but by memory. She placed a hand over her chest in the old Valari gesture of kinship. When the universe grows cold, she said, we will remember who shared their warmth first. Elias slipped the jacket over his shoulders. It fit perfectly. As he left the chamber, stepping out into the stars once more, he realized something simple and profound. Humanity had not earned its place among the great powers through conquest. Not through fear, but through a moment of compassion on a frozen moon, when one human chose to be cold. So someone else didn't have to be. And that the galaxy would remember.